Hey, what's up everyone? Hope you're all having a great day. As the year comes to an end and a new year begins, I wanted to take the time to talk about something I rarely see in the gaming community, which is to simply talk about the game we play in a positive way. Like many discussions on the internet, online Overwatch-related discussions tend to be mostly negative. Even though I would say for the most part, the bulk of content creators are very positive people, discussion-related content is almost always negative in nature. There's no shortage of commentary talking about the apparent death of Overwatch, and it seems like every other video talks about something being a problem or an issue with the game. And if I'm honest, I also contribute to this trend as well, as many of my videos are discussion-style videos, which means I'm usually going to be talking about something that the community doesn't like. Though it may seem like it, I don't think people in general like to be negative. It's just that we only really tend to speak up when there's something we have a problem with. And so in any kind of public forum, the vast majority of discussions are always going to have a negative tone, because the people who don't have any problems generally don't say anything at all. It's why you should always be careful when you form your opinions based on online discussions about anything, because you can almost guarantee that you're predominantly going to hear only one side of the story of whatever you're looking for. However, I do think criticism is important, and I always want to emphasize that anytime I talk seriously about something being a problem, it's almost never because I hate it, but rather because I like it enough to want it to actually be better. To be clear, I don't think we should ever avoid talking about problems simply for the sake of being quote-unquote positive. But I think every once in a while, we should take a moment to stop complaining and remember what we have to appreciate in the first place, even if things aren't perfect. After all, things are unlikely to ever be perfect, and so if you never take a moment to even try to think positively, then you are probably doomed to always be in a negative state of mind. If you only pay attention to what you could have and never what you do have, then you'll always feel like you have nothing. In the context of online Overwatch-related discussions, this might sound like a hot take, but I actually really like playing Overwatch. And this might even sound like a scalding hot take, but Overwatch is actually my favorite game of all time. Of course, the game isn't perfect, nothing ever is, but in spite of its issues, I think the gameplay is fundamentally excellent. The game has a sort of pacing that, in my opinion, just isn't matched by any other FPS game right now. There's constant action, and you're rarely sitting there waiting for things to happen. That's not to say that slower-paced FPSs are inherently bad, but I think Overwatch sets itself apart in this way, and it's one of the main reasons I think the game is really fun. The strategic depth of Overwatch makes it unique among FPS games as well, where even veteran FPS players coming from other games aren't necessarily and often are not great Overwatch players. And it's not because Overwatch doesn't require great mechanics. In fact, I would say Overwatch is probably one of the most mechanically intensive FPSs right now. And it's not that other FPSs do not require strategic thinking, but Overwatch is just on a different level, to the point where even having aimbot and wall hacks isn't enough to allow you to dominate every level of skill, which is a characteristic that I think is quite unique to Overwatch. Overwatch isn't just about moving your crosshair more precisely, learning the map layouts, and obeying some positional guidelines. There's an element of creativity that you need in order to succeed in the game. You constantly need to be thinking about your plays, and there are practically endless ways you can criticize your own gameplay, which means there's constantly ways you can look to improve yourself as a player. I think the strategic depth is a major reason for the game's popularity. It keeps the game feeling interesting even when you're ultimately playing the same maps and modes. Within the game, each role has a different gameplay experience, and within each role, each hero again provides even more depth, which means that Overwatch can be played in vastly different ways with actual meaningful differences. Playing a different hero doesn't just mean learning to use a different gun or learning some abilities. It means that you need to fundamentally change how you think about the game. If you feel like you're getting bored of a certain hero, picking a hero you rarely play can even feel like you're learning a new yet familiar game. Playing Wrecking Ball, for example, is very different from playing Ana, which again means that not only are there many ways to play the game, from which you can pick your favorite, there's always something new you can learn if you're up for it. Having both depth and variety, there's a lot of opportunities for skill expression, and yet the game also manages to be one of the most accessible FPS games. Whether you've played FPS for decades or never in your life, there is something for you to have fun doing, and I think that's something worthy of commending. And I think this is one of the reasons the game is great for playing with your friends. Even if there is a wide range of skill among your group, the less experienced player doesn't just feel like a dead weight that's being carried by their teammates. They can still feel like they're contributing meaningfully to the success of the team. The game rewards individual play in a way that makes each player feel like their plays matter, while also rewarding team play in a way that encourages people to work together to accomplish a shared goal. Overwatch is fun to play both casually and competitively, and in my opinion, this is a key characteristic of all of the most successful FPSs right now. You can definitely make any game as casual or competitive as you want it to be, but I think the design of Overwatch makes it so that it doesn't feel weird at either end of the spectrum. In my opinion, what makes a game competitively interesting isn't flashiness or difficulty. It's the degree to which players or teams are able to find ways to demonstrate a difference of skill that can be appreciated by an observer. And in that sense, I think Overwatch is an excellent example of a game getting that right. In fact, I remember one of my first impressions of Overwatch was that the game should really have a thriving esports scene. In all seriousness, I think it's kind of a shame that the Overwatch League didn't work out in its previous iteration. But I'm hopeful that whatever they come up with in the future fares better, because I think Overwatch legitimately has a lot of potential to be a big player in the world of esports. Beyond gameplay, I also think the artistic and creative aspects of Overwatch are also excellent. To put it simply, I think the game looks great, and the art style has its own charm that I think is unique to Overwatch. And perhaps it's just a matter of perception, but I think the game manages to look fun and friendly without looking overly cartoony or silly. Without relying on super realistic graphics, Overwatch manages to create some of the best looking maps in the shooter genre. And I think the quality of the map aesthetics often go unnoticed because when you're in game, you're of course occupied with the game itself. But if you take a moment to really look at it, I think there's a lot to appreciate. If you get the right perspective, you could even make some pretty neat looking wallpapers or posters out of pretty much every Overwatch map, even the ones that aren't conventionally considered to be particularly visually impressive. I of course can't talk about Overwatch's creative design without talking about the characters, and I would confidently say that Overwatch has perhaps some of the most recognizable cast of characters in gaming. As a person who's not usually into the lore or story of PvP characters, I think Blizzard really manages to sell their heroes in a way where you really do feel like they have a personality. I'm sure sometimes people roll their eyes when Blizzard uses a word like hero fantasy, but I'm sure there are plenty of players who play heroes not because of gameplay reasons, but solely because they think the hero is cool. The unique hero visuals, the bits of lore and backstory, the excellent voice acting, and I would even say the animation and sound design all combine together in a way that really allows you to feel like you're playing a hero and not just a set of abilities. Speaking of lore, I find that I've really come to enjoy the bits of world building that Blizzard has done. I wouldn't say the lore they've released so far is particularly deep, but it's interesting enough to where, even as someone who's rarely interested in the story of PvP games, I find myself wanting to know more about it. I think perhaps one thing the community could almost unanimously agree on is that the cinematics are great. It almost makes you wish there was some kind of TV series that told the story of Overwatch similar to what Riot did with Arcane, or perhaps some kind of PvE experience. The final thing I wanted to mention is that I really like the willingness of the dev team to communicate with its player base. And while I would say that's something that in theory should be expected of every game developer, the fact that many game developers do not do that makes Blizzard stand out in that regard. I'm not necessarily suggesting that other game developers don't communicate at all, but it's the degree and manner of communication that I've come to appreciate. Whether you agree or disagree with what they communicate is a different discussion, but I can respect a willingness to at least engage with the larger community and talk about their own game through live interviews and blog posts, so that at the very least the community gets to understand what they're actually thinking and planning. Communication makes the game feel like it's actually made by real people with their own thoughts and feelings, rather than just some arbitrary company with a random name. I think even if the developers disagree with certain complaints, it's always better to know that that is the case, rather than simply being completely ignored. An additional bonus point that I wanted to mention for why I like Overwatch is simply that I think the game is really fun. And to me, this is the most important point, and perhaps the only point that really matters. I've been playing Overwatch for a little over a year now, and although there may eventually come a time where I don't enjoy the game anymore, at least for now I can say quite confidently that Overwatch has provided me a lot of enjoyment, and for that I want to express my appreciation. Maybe sometimes things aren't always exactly where we want them to be, but I think it's important to at least occasionally reflect on the things you do enjoy, because those are the reasons we do what we do in the first place. And that's all I have to say for now. If you made it this far, I want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing and leaving a like and comment to support the channel. Let me know in the comments what you enjoy about Overwatch. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day.